Phoenix home construction is a lot different than you may have experienced elsewhere in the United States. We'll talk about the differences in local construction coming up right now on episode 14 of the Arizona Report. Welcome to the Arizona Report. My name is David Meek, licensed Arizona real estate broker. And today, an interesting topic I think that can shed some light on local Phoenix home construction. If you're not from the Arizona area or you haven't been a home buyer in the valley here, is there are many stark regional differences in home construction styles. And a lot of those are due to, let's say, soil or weather, or to make homes more resilient to the sun and the heat. If you're from elsewhere, you'll be interested to find out why we do what we do here in Phoenix. And I have an expert in the topic today in the studio to join us. His name is Clark Booth. Clark has been in the building trades, both commercial and residential, for over 30 years. He's also worked for the Arizona State Registrar of Contractors, and he's been invited to be an expert witness in court trials. Clark is an Arizona licensed home inspector and ready to talk details today. Clark, welcome to the Arizona Report.
Thank you very much, David. A privilege to be here.
Thank you. Well, Clark, when I first got started when I was living in Indiana, I was online, I was looking at homes, and I noticed how different the homes here in the valley are. And there are a lot of differences in the styles of construction. One of those is post-tension slabs. Before I moved here, I didn't know what a post-tension slab was. Do you see those a lot in Phoenix, and what are those?
Well, don't feel too bad. Nobody else seems to know either. And post-tension slabs are vaguely the equivalent of a floating boat, if you will.
Okay.
What they do is instead of the traditional style of foundation, which a lot of people realize you have some cracks and issues, with a post-tension slab, it means that the concrete is poured with cables that run through it before the wet concrete is poured.
Yes.
The concrete gets poured, and then 28 days after it's poured at the cure point, then there is mechanical tension placed on those cables, which in turn renders the concrete slab much stronger than it would otherwise be.
And the post-tension slabs are necessary here in the valley because we have what are called expansive soils. Our soil, especially in concentrated parts of the valley like Gilbert, Chandler, up north in Anthem, west of downtown in the West Valley, Litchfield Park, our soils have high clay content. And when clay soil gets wet, it moves. It expands like a wet sponge. When it's dry, it shrinks. So if you have a concrete slab sitting on expansive soil like that, eventually that leads to heaving and cracking, and you've got all kinds of drywall problems and structural problems. So post-tension slabs, I think it's a relatively recent technology, isn't it?
Yes. Generally speaking, over about the last 20 to 25 years, a lot of the builders have gone toward that direction because it reduces their liability, increases their own customer satisfaction. They've decided from an economics decision it's worth doing. It's obviously more expensive, but it does tend to last a lot longer. I'm very much in favor of them, and we just warn people to not do any cutting or drilling, because if you do happen to hit one of those cables, you can have a big problem.
They are tensioned, I've read, and my numbers could be wrong, Clark, but they are tensioned at like 26,000 pounds. These are braided steel cables, and they're under a lot of tension. And if you have let's say, a plumbing repair, or you want to drill your foundation for any reason, you'll discover that that's a big no-no. If you have a post-tension slab in your home, you can usually go to the garage and look down in the corner of the garage door, and there's a stamp in the concrete that says, "Do not drill."
Yes, do not cut or drill. And the good news is you can also hire someone that can come out with a scanner and can do an x-ray through the concrete, so they can tell you where the cables are and where it is safe to cut or drill. You just don't want to hit one of the cables.
And you don't want to do that as a casual homeowner on a weekend project.
Correct.
Okay, post-tension slabs. Swimming pools. This is a number that I've come up with. Basically, my research, I've scanned the MLS, and about 37% of the single-family homes have swimming pools. If you're coming from up north or out east, chances are where you're coming from, you don't have a lot of swimming pools, and they're very common here. They're an asset, not really a liability like they are elsewhere in the country. What are some things that you see in swimming pools that could be a surprise for a homeowner who hasn't owned one before?
Well, the good news is we have a complete protocol of inspection parameters that we've adopted in the last year and a half. And we've gone to a special program where we go through a whole laundry list instead of just walking out in the backyard and saying, "Hey, pool looks pretty good." Um, we do much more than that. So we do our very best to look at all the plumbing, the electrical connections, the float filler, the structure, the pool, the bond beam, the decking, and so on and so forth. So it's an extensive list of items that we check during the pool inspection.
I've read that about 1 in 20 pools will leak. And sometimes those are slow leaks, but if there's a leak, it can be very expensive because water is a little pricier here in the valley than it is in other places in the country.
Yes, that's correct.
Electrical panels. I was blown away when I moved to Arizona and I saw my electrical panel on the exterior of the wall. That was one of the big changes. Do you see that in most homes that you inspect?
Yes, there's virtually no homes here that have an electrical panel located on the interior of the home. Vast majority are on the outside, and that's for economic reasons. And because we don't have a freeze-thaw cycle, we don't have a tremendous amount of rain. So for that reason, it's just more efficient and economical to put the panels on the exterior of the homes, which is the way 99% of them are here.
That makes sense. Gutters. Very few homes here in the valley have gutters, even some of the $1 million homes. A lot of homeowners choose to do that after they move in, but we only get about 8 inches of rain here in the valley. That's one of the things I've noticed. Basements. Do you see a lot of basements in home inspections?
There's only a few builders that have chosen to put basements in their homes, and there is a certain amount of demand for it, of course, because we do get a lot of people from out of state, and some people just have sentimental reasons that they want to have a basement. But basements are a great thing. They're a wonderful potential. They're also potential issues too, and that's the reason that when we inspect a home with a basement, we look at the things like the window wells. We try to take a good close look at any ingress of water underneath. Make sure that the drainage has been well taken care of. Any gutters or downspouts are properly directed, because some houses do have gutters and downspouts and also have basements, but we don't have the freeze-thaw cycle, which is very advantageous for having a basement, because a lot of the issues in other parts of the country come from wet soils that then freeze and cause issues in the basement.
There's not a deep frost. There is no frost line here when you're building, so you don't have to go very deep for your footings to begin with, which is probably why a lot of builders just go with shallow footings and slabs, and don't go to the extra expense to find or to dig basements. Caliche is a hardened rock that exists in the valley here in a couple places below the surface, and that's very difficult to dig through.
In other parts of the country, it's called hardpan.
Hardpan. Okay.
Yes, that's the regular word. Caliche is kind of a localized terminology here, but it's the same thing. It's like going down a certain number of inches or feet below the soil and hitting a rock. And that's basically what it feels like.
You probably have to jackhammer it.
Yes. Okay. It's almost as hard as concrete.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Fireplaces. There aren't any wood-burning fireplaces in new construction. I've noticed that recently. Very, very few homes have the wood-burning fireplaces. They tend to be the older homes built prior to 98. One of the differences I noticed was lack of vinyl siding.
Correct.
In the Midwest, many of the homes have vinyl siding, but you don't see that here.
No, we use instead predominantly stucco, and it's a lighter weight stucco in the majority of times, instead of the traditional 3/4 to 7/8 inch thick stucco with the heavier gauge, what's commonly referred to as chicken wire, stucco wire. This is a lighter weight material that's commonly used, and it works pretty well here in the valley. It provides an insulation value, and it also has a plasticity that makes it somewhat resistant to cracks. So there's a reduced level of cracking, but of course it still cracks at some point. But it's been accepted by the marketplace here in Arizona for many years and seems to work well.
It's one of those adaptations, our architectural adaptations to the heat and sun, but it does seem to work well. My home is stucco as well. Water mains, they're on the exterior of homes, and I think that probably goes back to the lack of freeze thaw.
Exactly. They're almost all on the exterior, just like the panels. The electric panels are on the exterior. That's correct, because we don't have a freeze thaw cycle here, and it makes more sense to put it on the outside if you know it's never going to freeze.
That makes sense. Decks, wooden decks, haven't seen one in 10 years.
Well, there's not too many, and I'm from an area in Northern California where tons of people have decks. I used to build them when I was a contractor all the time, so I'm very familiar with redwood decks.
Yeah.
But you're right, I haven't built one in many, many years since I've been here in Arizona. There's no demand for them. The wood isn't even available here in the marketplace. So, yeah, nobody has them. But there are people that have other kinds of decks. The womanized, pressure-treated type decks.
Okay.
There are people that have those. And during the inspection process, there's a lot of things we try to look for because, unfortunately, very few decks are actually built correctly.
I'm thinking about joist hangers and
yes, and attachment
lack of joist hangers.
ledger attachments to the house, the support system underneath, the span of the structural supports, and so forth. You can have a deck that looks great and feels just about right the day you build it, but within a few years, it can get like a trampoline and get pretty spongy and start to fall apart.
And the scary thing, I saw a wooden deck once at a house, not here in the valley, but it was nailed to the home on the ledger board. It was not bolted to the structure. And wow,
that's actually unfortunately very common and
I know.
Needs to be addressed, and that's what we do try to take care of in an inspection.
And that's why it's absolutely critical that a home buyer, especially a home buyer moving from out of state to Phoenix, finds a local home inspector like yourself to look for these things and make sure they're getting a good home. Solar panels, a lot of solar panels here in the valley. I think Arizona is the number 3 state in the country for kilowatt hour generation for solar. What kind of problems do you see with solar panels, and do you inspect solar panels?
As a matter of fact, David, we're one of the only home inspection companies here in the state of Arizona that has a specific protocol to analyze and evaluate solar panels.
Great.
We very specifically look at the flashings on the roof, the mounting system, the kinds of wires that are used to them, the inverters, everything that is unique to a solar photovoltaic system. We take a look at that. Now, of course, we don't elaborate on things like how many dollars are you going to save a month.
Right.
That's done by others. But we do look at the physical plant, as it were, and look at how it's attached and installed on the house. And we have a very specific protocol that people are thrilled to know that we have. Because very few home inspectors offer it. It's not
That's
part.
right.
It's actually not part of the standard parameters for a home inspector. The state doesn't require it, so it's a little hard to actually find somebody who's set up to do that specifically.
What's a typical problem with the solar panel? Like, I don't know, with an
Well, they sometimes aren't attached to the roof correctly. Sometimes they have dangling wires. There's not enough space between the panel and the surface of the roof for proper ventilation.
I see.
There's issues with the inverter. There's incorrect types of conduit that is installed on the wall of the house where it comes down and rejoins with the panel. So there's a myriad of potential issues that you have with solar systems.
That could not only affect the safety, but also the efficiency of the system. If you're buying a house with solar panels, you're probably paying a premium to have that the solar panels generate that power for you. And if it's not operating properly, if it's not safe, you won't know unless you get a solar panel expert on the roof to look at that.
That's correct.
Last topic I have in my notes here: roofing. Lots of clay tiles, lots of concrete tile roofs in Phoenix. Some asphalt shingle roofs, but what do I need to think of if I'm a home buyer coming to Arizona and I've never owned a home with a clay or a concrete tile roof? I've heard they last for 75 years, but what are some of the considerations?
Well, that's true. They do have the potential to last a lifetime, a human lifetime. But on the other hand, there are a number of potential issues, including the fastening methods, but most important is the underlayment. What goes underneath? Because a roof is a system. It's more than just a single component.
The underlayment, if you could expand on that.
Yes. And we had a very fortunate sweet spot a few years ago, probably between about 2003 and 2006, at the peak of the market before the crash. Builders were getting so backed up, they were so busy building houses that
I know where you're going with this.
Yes, they had to use, instead of using standard underlayment, they upgraded, since they were making a ton of money at the time, they upgraded to put rolled roofing, which is granular material. And that rolled roofing can last indefinitely out in the direct sunlight because that's what it's made for. And then they came back months later and would put down the clay tiles or the concrete tiles.
And the underlayment is almost like a tar. It's not a tar paper, but it's a petroleum product that is it's
right.
A paper.
Exactly. It's impregnated asphalt type paper is the lowest grade. There are a number of other membranes that go up from there, but people commonly use the term tar paper when they're talking about it.
But it's designed to be a waterproof layer under the concrete tile
roofing.
Okay.
Correct. And so essentially the concrete tile roof protects the underlayment from the majority of the UV rays of the sun. But just in the heating, cooling cycle over a period of 15 to 20 to 25 years, you can potentially have a lot of dry out of that underlayment underneath the visible part that you see, which can lead to leaks in the future.
And it just crumbles. It can crumble in your hand if it's 15 or 20 years old.
Yeah, generally I think they last 15 to 20 would be a minimum. I think most of them last 20 to 25 as a general rule.
That makes sense. How many home inspectors are there in Arizona right now?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it's a fluid number. I think the last thing I heard was around 800 something.
800, okay.
What that just means is the number that are licensed. But in the real world, there's a lot of people that hold a license and never do any home inspections.
I see.
So I think we would say that in any given moment, there's probably between 500 and 1,000 total licensed individuals.
Sounds like a good guess.
But there's actually only a few hundred of us that are really in the business and stay with the business year after year and have the experience, credentialing, and so forth to be regularly called on by our trusted customers.
And have 30 years of experience in the industry like you do on the residential end.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons that I teach home inspection too at the nonprofit organizations where I donate my time.
And you're bilingual.
Yes,
in Spanish.
And I just do it for fun.
Give me some Spanish for some listeners who are fluent and how you can help them as a home inspector.
Pues si vienen aquí a comprar su casa en Arizona, que se sienten bienvenidos. And what I said was, if you're coming to buy a house here in Arizona, please feel welcome.
Wonderful. How does a buyer moving here from out of state find a home inspector like you?
Well, most people just look on the internet and they Google the word home inspector. And I would suggest there's a couple of better ways to do that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's a school of thought that says that I, the buyer, want to get my own home inspector. I don't want to get with the one that my real estate agent recommends because I'm afraid that they're in league and the home inspector might turn a blind eye to known defects because he's buddies with my agent who wants to make a commission.
It is best if the buyer selects his or her own home inspector.
That's that school of thought.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily agree with. I certainly give credence to it. But on the other hand, if you have a good, honest real estate agent, an honest real estate agent actually wants you to find everything wrong with the house. And in fact, I'm very happy to say, in all the years I've been doing this, I do not have one single time when I've ever had a real estate agent, a buyer's agent, or a seller's agent even say, "Oh, come on, Clark, can you just kind of overlook this one thing one time?" Because in the case of an agent, I tell them when I begin my relationship with them, if you ever ask me that, not only am I going to deny you that request, but I'm also going to turn you into the Department of Real Estate and have administrative action taken against your license, and I'll testify against you in a hearing. So I'm not the guy to try to pawn that off on.
And a good agent will realize that an excellent home inspector is worth his or her weight in gold, because you're protecting not only the buyer, but you're protecting the agent from liability.
Exactly.
Nobody wants issues after closing. If there's going to be a problem, let's discover it now. Let's work it out, negotiate it with the seller, and everybody's on the same page.
Yes.
That's
and
a great philosophy.
I don't want to elaborate on this too much, but I just finished a full jury trial about 2 weeks ago, precisely the same thing that started back in 2015. The case just culminated a couple of weeks ago in 2019, where it was a buyer-seller situation, a disclosure issue, and I worked for an extensive period of time as an expert witness on that case. So I was a consulting expert and expert witness in the case. And it's very fascinating. If anybody wants to call and talk to me about it, I'll be happy to tell them more detail.
Excellent. And that's a great lead-in for my next question is, if someone is watching this video and they would like to hire you to be their home inspector here in the Phoenix Metro, how do they get a hold of you? What's a good phone number and website?
It's clarkbooth.com is my website.
Okay.
And my phone number, which is the best way to get a hold of me the fastest, 480-255-2377. So it's 480-255-2377.
Wonderful. Well, Clark, thank you for coming in today to the Arizona Report. This is good information for out-of-state buyers, and those looking for that type of information can contact you and learn more about the types of homes we have here in Arizona.
Thank you very much, David.
You got it. Thank you for tuning in today. This has been episode 14 of the Arizona Report. Phoenix home construction isn't like it is back east. If you'd like to find out more about my thoughts on the Phoenix real estate market, my website, arizonareport.com, report.com. My number here in the studio is 480-999-MOVE. That's 480-999-MOVE. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out all my videos online, like and subscribe, and we'll see you in episode 15.